Minister, I think the election of Syriza has been a fantastic shot in the arm for hard-pressed citizens all over Europe by raising the prospect of a Europe that could be run in the interests of the millions rather than the millionaires. And I too would like to pass the new government and the Greek people my best regards. And I think it's against that backdrop that I was appalled to hear the comments of the Minister for Foreign Affairs dismissing the prospect of a debt conference on the basis that it is not in Europe's interest, according to him. What Europeans is he talking about that it's not in their interest? Certainly such a conference wouldn't be in the interests of the big bankers and bondholders, but it most definitely would be in the interests of the ordinary citizens of Europe, not least Irish people as well as our Greek and Spanish peers. And I think that vision of hope that the Greek government has given us is something that people the length and breadth of this country will seek to emulate in the next general election. And I think it's illustrative to look at Paul Krugman talking in the Irish Times today when he said we have to look at the roots of the political earthquake in Greece and realise that it comes from the Troika's programme there. These are the people who unleashed the human nightmare of 28% unemployment in Greece, 60% youth unemployment. And these situations exist not because the Greek government didn't listen to the Troika, but because they did. And now these are the same forces that tell the new government that they have to be reasonable and they have to be realistic. And as Krugman says, if anything, the problem that will be facing Syriza is that they're not radical enough and they need to take that situation forward. And I think we here should be doing everything we can to support them. I think there's been a nauseating hypocrisy which was dealt with by Deputy Wallace in relation to how this government has slavishly followed EU foreign policy. It's a violation of our neutrality and it's not something that I believe the Irish people are interested in. We're very quick to run along and impose sanctions on Russia like everyone else for the illegal annexation of Crimea and the deliberate stabilisation of the Ukraine. But as Deputy Wallace says, we've absolutely no problem whatsoever in dealing with Saudi Arabia, who would kind of nearly make ISIS look good. 10 people publicly beheaded this year alone. And very nice not to see flags being flown at half-mast here, an absolute outrage to women and human rights activists that we would go along with that. We stand idly by and allow Israel bomb people in Gaza. We've no problem about what's going on in Egypt and so on, but it's an entirely different matter when it comes to Russia. What absolute sickening hypocrisy. Why, if we're serious and neutral, would we not be consistent across the board? And of course the reality is that the conflict between NATO and Russia has been going on for decades. But the imminent pressure behind it now is that NATO has basically taken over all of Eastern Europe, encircling Russia with military bases, which if it was happening on the Canadian border or the Mexican border, I'll tell you we'd have a far greater level of aggression and fatalities than exist at the moment. And instead what we have is an anti-Russian agenda basically forcing Ukrainians into a deal with the EU. And I think if we were really neutral, what we would be doing is supporting the Ukrainian people in their ability to internally sort things out for themselves and not have a situation, and not slavishly following the EU agenda, which, as Deputy Wallace very accurately put it, is also about gas, financial resources and so on, and it's nothing got to do with human rights or self-determination. And it is a scandal, yet again, that this government goes along the same slavish adherence to US and EU foreign policy.
Thank you, Deputy Seamus.